Welcome, and thank you all for coming to this afternoon's virtual business event. I'm Ellen Jampol, Business Librarian at the Westport Library. Before we begin our talk, I'd just like to remind everyone to check out all the great upcoming virtual events at the Westport Library by going to our website, www.westportlibrary.org. Besides business programming, I also head our career and job services at the library by providing resume reviews, LinkedIn profile consultations, and career counseling, all done remotely. I also facilitate the library's job search work team, which is a weekly networking and accountability group for people in transition. Please contact me at ejanpol@westportlibrary.org for any of these services. Our talk today is the third and final segment of our longevity series, and it focuses on health. To participate fully in the longevity economy, our health becomes our most important ally. Most of current Western medicine is based on managing diseases with medications, but often there are things we can do in our lifestyles to stay healthy and prevent problems from occurring in the first place. Our speaker today is Dr. Katie Takayasu, an integrative medicine specialist in Stamford. Her talk is focused on the future of integrative medicine, an holistic approach to care that focuses on lifestyle factors like nutrition, exercise, sleep, spirituality, and alternative modalities like acupuncture and herbs and supplements. Dr. Takayasu has both an MD and an M.B.A, and she helps patients heal naturally with acupuncture, mind-body medicine, botanical medicine, nutrition, and lifestyle optimization. She is an assistant professor of clinical medicine at Columbia University, New York Presbyterian, and teaches the next generation of doctors about healing the whole patient, mind, body, and soul. For her own well-being, Dr. Katie practices what she preaches. She engages in yoga and meditation regularly and enjoys experimenting with plant-based cuisine in the kitchen. Just for some ground rules, please post questions in the chat box and we will answer them at the end of the talk. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Katie Takayasu, who will talk on the future of healthcare, integrative medicine for the whole person. Dr. Katie.
I am so happy to be here, and I just love that we get to connect in this way in the middle of my day, in the middle of your day. The magic of technology brings us all together. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see my presentation. And hopefully that's starting to pop up. It's a pink rimmed box because pink is my favorite color. I also think that pink is a really good representation of that that internal sense of self because it's so warm. So that's why it's a part of my of the way that I present myself. We're going to talk today about the future of healthcare, about how integrative medicine plays into that. And if integrative medicine is a not familiar topic to you, we're going to go into that first, and then we're going to head into the way that I think about managing the whole health and really managing stress. And if you would like to chat with me along the way, meaning you want to provide questions, you can do that, in real time, and then we'll go over those at the end. me see how to, oh, there we go. I just clicked that way. So I have no disclosures, nothing to tell you before we start. I do just want to explain who I am and how I got to this place in my life where I practice integrative medicine, and also let you know that first and foremost, I'm a human along this beautiful human journey, and that I am at my heart a chubby girl from Ohio who grew up amongst the cornfields down the road from my dad's family medicine practice, where he still practices medicine today, and got to see that really beautiful rural way of practicing family medicine. And I always knew that I wanted to be a doctor. And when I got to medical school and did my family medicine rotation, I just felt at home. And I realized along the way that I was struggling with some anxiety, because all at once I had gone from being the cream of the crop to competing amongst the cream of the crop. And it was really tough. Fast forward a few years, I became a resident in family medicine at Columbia, which is where I now hold my academic appointment. And I was overworked and underslept and was eating way too much hospital food and just really feeling like a shell of myself. And at the same time, wanted to become a mama bear. And things just weren't happening as fast as I thought they would. So I went to go see my primary doctor, who I love, who sees patients as the whole person. And the first thing he did was look into my eyes and actually empathize with me and what was going on in my life at that time. And at the same time, recommended that I see his wife's acupuncturist. And it was on the acupuncture table that I felt this really compelling drive to share the miracle of acupuncture, of feeding yourself real food, of doing more yoga and less crazy running, and just really pulling together all of the pieces of health that helped me feel like a little bit more whole. And so that's how I got into this space. It's really my eternal connection to wanting to be my most authentic self and to help others do that as well. That brings me to the table and brings me to the office every day. So we're going to talk first about why everyone, I think, needs to build integrative medicine into their lives. Then we'll define stress and resiliency, and then we'll talk about the tools that you need to stay resilient. So back in 1948, the World Health Organization put out this statement that health is a state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And I would pose to you today that we're not doing a very good job of actually staying in the space of wellness. We actually in Western medicine really just, try to put Band-Aids on problems, but we don't really get to the root cause. Historically, when we look at the stuff that was taking us out 50, 100 years ago, it was traditionally stuff that was caused by germs, things like pneumonia and tuberculosis. But then as modern medicine and public health became more a part of who we are, we realized that most of what's actually taking us out now, which is things like heart disease and stroke and diabetes, and those kinds of things, are really just influenced by lifestyle, and that we're not doing a very good job of managing our lifestyle on a regular basis. I love this quote from Julie Holland. She's a psychiatrist who wrote a very good book. I really like it for all my women patients. It's called Moody Bitches. You should check it out. I bet your library has a copy. Mine and Darien does. And she wrote a New York Times article to announce her book, which basically tries to make the connection between the fact that we often over-medicate with SSRIs and other antidepressant or anti-anxiety medicines, and that we don't really have a connection to the normal ups and downs of perimenopause or the normal ups and downs of life. And what she says in her New York Times article was that people are trying to medicate a normal reaction to an unnatural set of stressors, lives without nearly enough sleep, sunshine, nutrients, movement, and eye contact, which is crucial to us as social primates. So I want you to think about today the fact that we have medicines for everything, but are there things you could do in your lifestyle that'll actually make you feel better? And we're going to talk along the way about the newer things in health, especially in integrative medicine, that are really exciting, that might be potential things for you. So in integrative medicine, we're always thinking about how do we get to the root cause. So Above ground, we see things like allergies and cancer and heart disease and anxiety. But below ground, we know that there are things like chronic stress and chronic inflammation, bad digestion, history of trauma. Those kinds of things are the root cause to what's going on above the surface. And we only behoove ourselves and our health if we actually look below the surface. Integrative medicine is that beautiful mixture of traditional Western medicine along with evidence-based complementary modalities. So I was trained just like every other family doctor across the universe in traditional residency, and I still am able to practice traditional medicine, so I can still write prescriptions. I just choose to do other things instead, like teach people the balance that can exist with acupuncture and proper nutrition and using herbs and supplements and things of that nature instead. But I love that I can choose from a whole big bag of tricks. Integrative medicine really prizes itself on being part of the really the biopsychosocial model of holistic health. So we're really truly looking at the mind, the body, and the spirit. We're very patient-centered, and our emphasis really is on the provider-patient relationship. I think about myself much more like a coach than I really do a traditional doctor because of the way that I work with patients to really find out what's going to improve their lives and helping them get there. And like I said, I utilize all appropriate therapies. One of my favorite examples of this is when someone has a cholesterol problem. My first go-to is not to write you a prescription for Lipitor. My first thing is like, let's talk about your lifestyle. Let's talk about your family history. Let's talk about like what's actually going on in your life that can be, you know, just changed up a little bit. And then if you really put forth like the good college try and your cholesterol still doesn't really behave, there's some stuff we can actually do to test it, which is kind of cool, to figure out, like, are you a producer of cholesterol or are you actually an absorber of cholesterol from your food? Because some of us have different genetic variations there. And then we can figure out using that kind of data, well, would Lipitor actually be great for you or would a different prescription be medicine be better? And we can do that really effectively. So I pose that everybody needs an integrative medicine doctor. So if you have stress, anxiety, depression, any kind of women's health issue, if you have metabolic stuff like high cholesterol, if you have any kind of chronic pain or chronic digestive issues, or you just want to know what you should be doing in your health, even though you're a generally healthy person, I would say you should come find your friendly integrative medicine doctor. Our integrative approach when we see patients really is based on food, it's exercise, it's sleep hygiene, and it's talking about spirituality and connection to the spiritual self, along with stress management. And then into that, we start to pepper things like supplement herbs and acupuncture. But that's the basis. And that's what we're going to go over today when it comes to stress management. So let's talk a little bit first about stress and resilience. So as you all know, stress is just dessert spelled backwards. But in all seriousness, we all know that there are different types of stressors in our life. So I like to think about this like a stoplight. We all have green stressors in our lives. These are the stressors that, you know, get us to work on time or, you know, help our kids catch the bus or, you know, just like little things that happen during our day that sort of just like keep us on target. Those are fine. We all have those. Then there are yellow stressors. These are the more significant stressors that your body can tolerate for a little bit more extended period of time. So say you have a relative who gets hospitalized and you kind of need to be there for your relative as well as like juggle your own schedule to make that happen. That would be an example of a yellow stressor. And our bodies are able to connect to that stress pretty easily. Our bodies create stress hormones in our adrenal glands, as well as other glands in the body that help us adapt to stress, namely cortisol and adrenaline in the form of epinephrine and norepinephrine. And those are secreted at higher amounts when we're under stress. And you can tolerate like a moderate amount of that for a specific amount of time. Cortisol is the one that gets a lot of attention because cortisol is the one when sort of left to its own devices for a long period of time actually wreaks probably the most havoc. And that's because it, over the course of time, to help you adapt to stress, increases your blood sugar. It increases It increases your awake sort of alertness, so it kind of prevents you from falling asleep. And it does a lot of other like really interesting things in the body that basically help you to dial up your fight or flight response. The problem is that most of us don't really have even yellow stressors anymore. Everything seems to be elevated to that red level stressor. And the red level stressors are those stressors that you can only take on for moments at a time. It's like when you have to pull your kid away from being hit by a car, or you burn your hand on the stove and you have to jerk it back and run to the sink to get it under cold water. Those stressors are just meant to be really quick. But the problem with the way that Americans live our lives is that we are constantly exerting more pressure onto ourselves and externally onto us. And we end up not really having green and yellow stressors, but really just yellow and red. And after a while, the body just literally can't keep up. So I like to think about stress being broken into things that you can predict and things that you can't. So we all have those sort of things in our life that are expected. You know, you decide to get married. Yeah, that's going to be a stress. You decide, that your kids decide they're going to go to college, and all at once you're an empty nester. Like, that's an expected stress. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in our lives that's just not expected. And so what I really think about is the fact that we need to build this basket of resilience. We need to use all of the lifestyle things that we have, including nutrient dense food, joyful exercise, proper sleep, and attending to our spiritual selves, to build that basket of resilience so that when you have an unexpected life stressor, it doesn't break you, that you're able to hold on to that. And so that's what we're going to work on today. So no surprise, if you had to think of my top 5 stress management secrets, they would really be to start with eating real food. This is a little more complicated than one would think. I like what Michael Pollan says in his book. He's got so many great books, but I really love his book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. He says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Honestly, if you don't remember anything else I say today, and you just come back to this Michael Pollan quote, you're probably going to be in good company. The problem is that many of us just don't eat real food. I think about food like medicine. What we put into our bodies is what we get out from them. And it's just like putting good gas in your car. You would never put, unleaded or diesel gas, leaded or diesel gas in your unleaded car. You just wouldn't do that, because that's not the kind of fuel that your car needs to run. And then you would, I'm sure, wreak all sorts of havoc in your car's system if you didn't give it the kind of gas that it wanted. Same thing exists in your life. What you eat, not only how much you eat, but the quality of the food that you eat really matters. And unfortunately, at least 25%, if not more, of Americans suffer from what's called metabolic syndrome, which is that nasty combination of an alteration to the blood sugar, as accompanied by low happy HDL cholesterol, high triglycerides, and usually hypertension. And that's disastrous in combination with being overweight or obese at life expectancy, and just actually decreasing the quality of your life over time. I also recognize in my practice that not everybody is made to eat every food. So I could talk about the glories of broccoli today, but if you notice every time you eat broccoli, it makes you feel really sick, then that's something to actually talk about with your integrative medicine doctor. What's new and cool in sort of the future of health these days is that we can actually do pretty good food sensitivity testing, and it's not that difficult to come by. Generally not covered by insurance. A lot of the stuff I'll talk today as new and improved is not covered by insurance, or is only partially covered by insurance. But I do find for some patients, if they're really stumped about like what's going on in their health, doing a food sensitivity test can be helpful. It's not a surefire. There are some sort of things to keep in mind. And that's why a lot of allergists don't like the test, is because it's not as easy as doing like a skin prick test to see if you are frankly allergic to peanuts or something of that nature. But it can be a help, a shot in the right direction if you are having some sort of strange symptoms in your life. but everyone needs to basically eat a modified Mediterranean diet. If you took all the different diets that existed out there and like overlapped them and made like a beautiful Venn diagram, what you'd come back to, and this is what I hold to be true, is that we should be eating mostly vegetables, a little bit of fruit. We need to be whole grains, not, gluten-free rice pasta, but actual brown rice, whatever nature has made for us. We need to be eating monounsaturated fats primarily, but a good amount of saturated and other polyunsaturated fats as well. And then we also need to be including high quality lean protein, mostly from plants, but occasional animals is fine too. I myself teach and also live a more plant forward lifestyle, but honestly, I enjoy every single food on the face of the planet. In a Mediterranean diet, there is less emphasis on dairy, less emphasis on animal protein, and definitely less emphasis on processed grains. So if you look at something in your life and you're like, yo, I don't really know how this got on the face of the planet, you probably shouldn't eat very much of it. So one of the big tricky foods that's out there are things like Cheerios, which blasted all over the box says whole grains, but both you and I know Cheerios don't grow on trees. So that's an example of a processed grain. So if you just look at something, like literally look on your plate and you don't recognize that as being nature made, then you probably should eat less. We know that if you eat a Mediterranean diet that's actually very rich in fat and very plant forward, that you will live a longer life. And we know that you're going to have less inflammation in your body as well. When they've compared the Mediterranean diet to the typical American Heart Association diet, we know that it leads to lower fasting glucose or lower blood sugar in the morning. We know that it helps control your systolic or blood pressure numbers, and we can see inflammatory markers go down. But I'm a big believer in all of this conversation on food that you just need to do this about 80% of the time. I think there's a lot of really beautiful, unhealthy food out there that just, tastes good because it's good. And it's okay to have those kinds of things from time to time. The problem is we don't really treat them like treats in our life. We just, eat them all the time. So a couple of follow-ups to the conversation about food. One is I don't want you to drink your calories. You can have a little bit of kombucha, you can have some tea, some seltzer, a little red wine if you like, but primarily you should be drinking water. And the reason for that is that when you get your calories from things like juice or soda or sports beverages or whatever, you're missing out on all the fiber that you need in your life. And generally, most of us need like 30 to 40 grams of fiber every day. It's crazy the amount of fiber that our ancestors were eating. Some of the stuff I've read is like 100 or 120 grams of fiber every day, but the average American gets in like 8 grams. And so I want you to maybe do a little fiber calculation for yourself and make sure that you're getting enough in every day. The second thing I'll follow up with is that plastic packaging is bad. Generally, if something comes in a plastic package, it's not going to be very good for you. The only sort of exceptions to this in general would be things like whole grains. But you buy a bag of quinoa and you look at the label and it just says quinoa, you know what's in it. So buying things that are single ingredient is also really important. I also love dark chocolate, like really love dark chocolate. I have some every day, usually about 3 o'clock, just when like you're kind of like feeling stressed about the afternoon and powering through. And it really is like one of the best things that I've ever done for myself. I remember being in this office several years ago when I started working here, 8.5, 9 years ago. And my colleague gave me my very first square of 85% dark chocolate, and I put it in my mouth, sort of expecting it to taste like semi-sweet chocolate chips, which are much more sugary. And I put it in my mouth and I was like, wow, this is really dark. And I barely choked it down. And now 85% actually tastes really sweet to me. And the reason I bring this up is one, that 85, 90, 95% extra dark chocolate is really the way to go, because that's where you get that bigger concentration of flavanols and resveratrol and all the beautiful anti-inflammatory compounds, all the stuff you want without a lot of sugar, but also that our taste buds are capable of changing over time. And so even though I didn't love that chocolate 8 years ago, now I absolutely adore it. And so even if something doesn't taste that good to you now, keep going back to it. Just like the way you feed your little people in your life, broccoli like 15 times before you determine if they don't like it. You kind of have to do the same thing with yourself, because your taste buds will change over time. And speaking of taste buds, definitely sweeten foods yourself. One of the biggest disservices that you can do for you or your family is buying things that are already pre-sweetened, like pre-sweetened yogurt or almond milk that has sugar in it, or just generally letting the food companies put sugar in your food for you. You almost always will put in less sugar than what they do. And the reason to really be cognizant of this is that children don't have an upper threshold of like what's too sweet. So at some point in time, if I gave you a glass of iced tea and I was putting sugar in it, at some point in time, you'd be like, okay, like that's too much sugar. I can't drink this. But a little kid doesn't have that sort of upper threshold. And the food companies know this. And so they know that if they give kids sweet yogurt and hyper flavored Doritos chips and like all these other like ultra processed things that we eat, that the kids will preferentially want them. And of course, that's a big problem. And so it's really important that we sweeten foods for ourselves. I'm a really big believer in eating real food that you home cook. You can certainly eat out from time to time, and you can certainly find places around us. We live in a beautiful, within an oasis of food options in this part of the country. But just know that there's a reason that the salad you buy at the corner store tastes a lot better than the one you make at home. It's because they're putting stuff in there, usually salt, fat, or sugar, that you wouldn't probably put in your own salad. And so coming home to cook is probably the best thing you can do. I really think that you can make a lot of really easy meals, even if you're working full time and don't have a lot of time when you get home. I gave you some of my quick homemade meals there, as well as a general smoothie recipe. Honestly, you can add vegetables to everything. So even if you are getting takeout from your favorite Thai place and you get green curry, it probably doesn't have enough vegetables in it. So you can ask for an extra order of, steamed vegetables on the side and kind of thin it out. You can also have frozen vegetables in your freezer. So like when my family orders pizza, we all have like 1 or 2 slices of pizza, and then we have a big side of vegetables instead of eating always just the pizza. And remember that if you are going out to eat these days, that you can take half your meal home and you can enjoy it later. And our eyes are often much bigger than our stomachs. And so if you stop when you're 80% full, you're going to be better served. It's also important to think about your microbiome. This is what's new in health these days, is everybody's talking about probiotics and prebiotics. Your microbiome is just that beautiful mix of bacteria that live in your colon to keep you healthy. And it starts right when we're born. So babies come out of the womb sterile. And as they pass through the vaginal canal, they get inoculated with a bunch of bacteria from their mom's vaginas. And so if you do have babies in your life who are born by C-section, the first thing you should do is get them all over your skin to skin as soon as possible so that they can start to pick up some of those microbes that are naturally on our skin. And then you have to think about breast milk like being fertilizer for your gut microbiome. So as soon as you get inoculated with all those bacteria, get that baby on the breast, get them breast milk, because the oligosaccharides that are naturally found in breast milk are literally like fertilizer to that microbiome. And then we have to keep it going throughout our lifetime. So I'm a big believer in trying to avoid antibiotics. Now, if you get pneumonia and your doctor says take antibiotics, then you should do it. But if you have like a passing cold or, a little earache or something of that nature, like talk to your doctor and see if you can avoid taking antibiotics, because the fewer antibiotics you take, the better. You also want to make sure that you keep your microbiome healthy by making sure that you not only eat prebiotic rich food, which are all of your really, really fiber-rich foods like Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes, asparagus, onions, garlic, any kind of fiber-rich food. That's what your little microbiome wants to eat. So you eat those fiber-rich foods and your little microbiomes munch on them. And what they do is they make these beautiful compounds called short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs, are your best friend because those are your anti-inflammatory messengers that go all over the body. So you are rewarded for not only eating the fiber-rich food and feeding your probiotics, but also eating probiotic-rich food in the form of plain yogurt or kefir, kimchi, miso, tempeh, kombucha, sauerkraut. Those really sour foods are really good because they have more of those, more of that microbiome in there, and it just supports, what you're doing for yourself. The future of health really comes in the form of stool analysis. So we're doing a lot more looking as to what is actually in people's people's poop these days? What's the microbiome mix? What do the probiotics look like? Do you have any rogue infections? Do you need digestive enzymes? Is there undigested fat or protein in your stool that needs to be digested better? We can look at all that stuff in our stool analyses these days, which is pretty exciting. I call them fancy stool tests. And interestingly, we're also finding more use for fecal transplants, which basically takes the poop of very healthy people, freeze dries it, and makes it so that it's not gross, puts it in little capsules, and then you can give it to people who have bowel issues and actually restore their natural good microbiome. So it's another sort of more powerful way to repopulate or repopulate the gut. That was a bad joke. I hope you laughed in your own house. All right, secret number 2 to stress management. We got to sweat every single day. And I say almost every single day because you don't have to be perfect about anything. Like I said, I'm all about the 80-20 rule, and what you do 80% of the time is what matters. So I would really love to see people getting like 20 to 30 minutes of some kind of moderate exercise. I like to sort of qualify and say that it should be joyful. I think of exercise like me time. It's time that I'm dedicating just to myself. And I take it that way in my life every day. It's a vote, it's a deposit in my box. It's a vote for me over the course of the day when I do so much for so many other people. And I like the idea of it being joyful because then it doesn't stress your body out. If you are dripping with sweat and feel like you need a rest after your workout, then you're doing too much. And I find a lot of my younger patients are actually over exercising. There's a lot of science out there to support the idea of green exercise. This would be exercise done outdoors. We know that that's better for your mood. And honestly, if there's one reason to exercise, it's not because you're going to look cute in your bikini. It's because it's good for your mental health space and one of your major stress management tools. And I'd also like to make a little shout out to lean body maintenance. So what we know as we age is that we lose our muscle mass. And our muscle mass is key to our ability to retaining our independence. When I think about my 90-year-old grandmother, actually she's 91, who's still living on her own back in Ohio, who's still squatting on her toilet, doing her exercises every day, mowing her lawn. Yes, she's doing that because she's strong and through her life has prioritized actually maintaining her muscle mass. So if you want to be the person squatting on your own toilet, walking up and down stairs, managing getting in and out of your car and driving, then you best start doing some body weight, lean body maintenance exercises. There's a lot of science about exercise these days, and there's some conflicting stuff. It may matter if you do it fasting. It may matter if you do it after a meal. But honestly, any time of day that you can build in exercise is going to be good for you. And what's really cool in the future of health these days is that we have all these fancy devices like an iWatch that can not only, monitor our activity, but remind us that we've been sedentary for too long. It can actually check our O2, our oxygen saturation, and tell us if we're not breathing deeply enough. And what's very cool is it can do stuff like monitor our heart rate and our EKG in this little device so that we can figure out if we actually are having like normal rhythms in our life. Like some of that stuff is really fascinating, and we didn't have access to this kind of stuff, only a couple of years ago. So exercise isn't something that you necessarily have to dedicate like an hour or two every day. It can also just be taking a walk with a neighbor or doing what I do, which is catching up with a friend when we just walk and talk at the same time. And we not only get to catch up, but we also get our exercise done for the day. So I encourage you to be creative, especially in this time of COVID, when we're all kind of feeling a bit socially isolated. Secret number 3 is that sleep makes everything feel better. And we all know this. We tell it to our kids and our grandkids, but we know inherently that it's true for us too. There are 2 things that really determine how we sleep on a regular basis. The first thing is our circadian rhythm. This is our natural sleep-wake cycle. And the second thing is our homeostatic sleep drive, which is really fancy talk for it's just how much your body wants to sleep. And that's very individual. Most of us need to sleep 7 to 9 hours. There are the very few rare birds who need to sleep 5 hours, and then there are the people who need to sleep 12, but most of us need to be in that 7 to 9 hour range. When it comes to circadian rhythm monitoring, we can use devices in our lives, whether it's our iPhone or iWatch or what other device, Fitbit, that you might be using, to actually measure our sleep-wake cycles. And it's not super fancy science yet. It will get fancier. A lot of it's just based on movement through the night to tell you like how much deep sleep you're getting. But it is kind of interesting to see, like, over the course of the night, how often are you getting into really deep sleep where you're actually dreaming and your body is paralyzed while your eyes are busy moving. They call that REM, rapid eye movement sleep, when you're actually dreaming. They think that's really when we do most of our best repair work. I also love the idea of having a slightly flexible alarm setting. So, it's one thing to sort of be jarred awake at 5 a.m. in the morning, but it's another thing for your body or your iWatch or whatever you're using to figure out that, like, oh, actually you come out of your sleep wake cycle at 5:06 a.m. Based on this particular time of night. And so using those kinds of tools can be really helpful to just sort of like helping us to get into our natural rhythms. And also, it's important to recognize that sleep changes as we age. So, historically, we were up in the middle of the night stoking the fire or, taking turns watching for predators. And so it's not really realistic to think that we're going to sleep perfectly through the night, completely 8 hours, like maybe we did when we were teenagers, though teenagers we know should be sleeping more. And I also think that it's important to recognize that, as we get older, our sleep starts to look more like when we were younger. So you are up more frequently during the night, and taking a little nap during the day is not the worst thing. We do have problems with insomnia. Generally, 15% of us will struggle with insomnia at some point in time in our lives, and that's even higher in kids. We often see insomnia in conjunction with other neuropsychologic disease, things like depression, anxiety, those kinds of things. But honestly, insomnia is just your subjective opinion that you have difficulty falling asleep or maintaining sleep. And the problem really with insomnia is that when you combine insomnia, the stressful life events that sort of trigger insomnia, with a lack of sleep, and then you start to get worried about what's going to happen tomorrow because you're not sleeping tonight, and then you add to that like some misconceptions about sleep, all at once you have this feed forward cycle that really lets you not rest, and we get the persistent insomnia. And I would pose to you today that most insomnia, most problems sleeping, are not actually the fact that we are not sleepy. It's just that we are excessively wakeful, and that in order to sleep better, that we actually need to relinquish our wakefulness and surrender to rest. And that's a really different way of thinking about sleep. It's not that we actually force ourselves to sleep. It's that we let go of our wakefulness so that we can sleep. I like this quote by I think he's a neurology researcher. So he probably has I think he's a neurosurgery researcher actually from Rochester. And he talks about the brain being like a dishwasher, that you can either be awake and aware and doing the good idea, the good work of like partying, or you can be asleep and cleaning up like a dishwasher, and that your brain literally needs to either be awake and aware or asleep and cleaning up, and that we have to sort of stop the party of our daily lives so that we can actually clean up at night. Secret number 4 is that supplements are supplemental. I always joke that one of my favorite things that ever happened in my practice is when an older woman came in carrying, no joke, like 2 Trader Joe's shopping bags full of supplements, and was like eating hot dogs for lunch. And she's like, "What supplements should I take?" I'm like, "You don't need any of these supplements. You just need to eat real food." So come back to the idea that we don't really need that many supplements. We just need to get our nutrition from our environment and from our food. And of course, coming back to home cooking being really important, and also spending time outdoors. And my friends, I know it's cold outside, but going outdoors, even just for 5, 10, 15 minutes, can be really refreshing and get yourself just a little bit of vitamin D, which is hard to come by these times in Connecticut. That said, there's a couple of my favorite supplements just listed there. Omega-3s are really tough to get in the diet. These are the fats that are found in things like salmon, black cod, halibut, chia, flax, even whole organic soy like edamame, tofu, and tempeh. These are just harder to get in your diet. So sometimes it's helpful to take an omega-3 supplement. I've been taking omega-3 supplement myself since medical school, and I'd say it's worked out okay for me. I also took it when I was pregnant, and I have heard that one of the richest sources of omega-3s in our food chain is actually breast milk. And I think that's because nature understands how important omega-3s are for baby brain development. Vitamin D is almost universally a needed supplement unless you live in an environment that just gets a lot of sun. The only way to know how much vitamin D to take is to have the level checked, and that's pretty easily done by your doctor. So you can ask for that at your next physical. I love turmeric. Turmeric is a beautiful spice we use in cooking to make curries and delicious things. It's got a gorgeous yellow color. And I always think, like, how can you argue with the colors in nature? How can you argue with the red of a raspberry or yellow of a turmeric? You just can't. It's nature's way of telling us that, like, these things are good for us. And certainly turmeric can be really helpful for people, you know, if they have more inflammatory type conditions like osteoarthritis, or inflammatory bowel disease, or things like asthma, allergies, those kinds of things. And then magnesium is a beautiful supplement, one of my favorites. It's so good for muscle relaxation, restless legs, headaches, period cramps, all sorts of stuff. Magnesium is really good for. And so magnesium rich foods are really good, but sometimes you need a supplement. And in the future of health, speaking of supplements, are these things called SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms. And these guys are little genetic variances that we can test for that actually tell us, like, what kinds of supplements you should be taking. So you can do little buccal swabs, like on the inside of your cheek, and figure out, like, do you need a methylated B complex? Do you need a specific type of SSRI, because those are more in line with your SNPs, your own genetic variations. And I think that the world of SNPs is just going to get bigger and bigger as we go. Rule number 5 is to be present. This is the last thing I'll talk about today. This is my way of talking about being connected to your spiritual self. So all of us in the background of our nervous systems have what's called the autonomic nervous system. It's the automatic nervous system. It's the background. And it's really broken into 2 parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Your sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight or freeze response, that you come into contact, you know, with a saber-toothed tiger and your body's like, oh gosh, like, I need to do something. The opposite of that is your parasympathetic reflex. And that's your rest and digest response. And they kind of act like yin and yang, and they're kind of bouncing back and forth. But what I have found with most of my patients over time, and this goes back to the way that Americans experience stress, is that most of us actually have way too much sympathetic drive and not nearly enough parasympathetic tone. And so what we do in meditation, what we do in prayer, what we do in yoga is we try to balance that out. So instead of, you know, we try to bring down the sympathetic a little bit, but really try to increase the parasympathetic tone so that we can match that a little bit better. The reason to do this is a really cool thing that they've just found in the brain called the default mode network. And the default mode network is this whole idea that our brain is constantly busy. It's the background story that we tell ourselves. And the more time that we spend in this sort of default stage of daydreaming, and estimates are that we spend like 50% of our time there, the more unhappy we are. So interestingly, the more time that you are present, listening to me in this hour conversation, or talking to a friend, or engaged in a book, or, you know, doing some yoga, the more time that you are actually engaged in your life, the better off you are. We know there are lots of ways to down-regulate the default mode network. Acupuncture is great. Sleep is great. I don't recommend psychedelic drugs, but it is a way to get there. Antidepressant medicines will actually change that as well. And yoga is fantastic. But meditation, that sustained attention to just breathing, to just being present in this moment, is how you actually start to change that wiring. And we know that we're capable of changing the wiring in our brains. And in the future of health, and as it, you know, relates to meditation in the default mode network, is that we can use our biometric devices to look at our heart rate variability and make sure that it's on cadence with what's actually restorative to our bodies. We can look at our oxygen saturation and know that if we're using less oxygen, it's because we're more calm. We also get daily rhythm reminders. My little Apple Watch tells me to meditate a couple of times a day. And so when I see that little reminder, instead of like clearing it out of my phone, I actually just take a hot second to myself to breathe in between patients. It doesn't take much to remind your system that everything is okay. It's literally like seconds and minutes at a time that you can create massive change. I'm also a really big believer in trying to come back to things that really matter to our bodies. We spend a whole lot of time on a daily basis doing stuff that doesn't really matter to our bodies, that doesn't bring us joy. And it's really important to spend lots of time doing things that bring us joy. I love the idea of hygge, which is a Danish term for coziness. And I only bring up this sort of picture here showing that we spend a lot of our time doing stuff that doesn't bring us much happiness. Like if you see at the bottom of that screen, that picture there, we spend a lot of time doing work in the blue line, but it doesn't bring us much happiness. And if you go to the top of the page there, you'll see that we don't spend very much time having sex at all, but it brings us a lot of happiness. So I'm not suggesting that you quit your job and have more sex, but maybe you try to find some kind of rhythm in your life that allows you to experience more joy on a regular basis. So we know, just to wrap this up, that there are good and bad stressors. And we've spent time talking about how do you build that resiliency basket. But if you feel like you need more help doing that, I'm really a big proponent of working individually with patients and clients to help them find more rest, to be more mindful, to eat more healthfully, and prioritize that gentle movement. And I do that in a way that allows your body to naturally detoxify. Our bodies on a regular basis are building up toxins because of the way that we live, but our bodies inherently know how to detoxify on their own. We just don't give them space to do that. And so I have a program that I wrote that is 5 or 10 days that allows you to come back to your center, that just allows you to detoxify your body on your own time. And it's not that hard. The commitment, honestly, is really just to eating more home cooked meals that are more plant forward. And I teach you how to do that, to really choose joyful movement in your life, to give up your night owl habits and just spend 5 minutes a day doing some kind of work on your spiritual self. And so I invite you to look into that on my website, which is just drkatie.com. And if I can be of help to any of you in any way, please know that it's literally like my life's greatest pleasure to work with patients and clients and really figure out like what's going to make you feel better, because that's what I've done with my life, is figured out that I've gone from this sort of shell of myself to a more wholesome, authentic person. And like I said, it's my life's work to help other people do the same thing. And so I'll open it up for questions. So I will stop sharing my screen and we'll go back to my face. All right. So I'll let Ellen kind of chime in with some questions if she has them.
Yes. One question I've had from the audience is that a person has been nervous to get an Apple Watch because of strapping radiation to her wrist or his wrist. Is the radiation a valid concern?
That's a really interesting question. I think I don't have enough data to answer that right now. I think that the benefits probably outweigh the risks, and there's a lot of things in health that I sort of fit into that basket of can't hurt, might help. And so while we don't know for sure that this won't hurt you, it probably is more beneficial than not to wear one. That said, I do know that holding a cell phone, like close to your head, close to your brain, is not a good idea. So if you can get a wireless headset, or just even using like the headphone jack device that like a phone has, that is a little bit better for you. I just don't have that information about an iWatch at this juncture. Great question though.
Thank you. Another participant says that natural, and I'll probably mispronounce this, salicylates in many fruits, veg, olive oil, herbs, spices, and especially in tea leaves, gives me, after digestion, a nosebleed one day later. So, Mediterranean diet makes me ill.
That's so interesting. Salicylates are a specific sort of compound that exists in medicines, as well as some foods. One thing to take into consideration is that if you are having on the regular irritations to things that probably shouldn't irritate you, then it would be worthwhile talking to your doctor or an integrative medicine or a functional medicine specialist to figure out if there are things you can do to strengthen your response. Meaning that if your digestion is not perfect, you could be more inclined to have these kinds of problems from food. A great example of this is someone who comes in and says like they can't eat any cruciferous vegetables, like they can't eat any Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, because it just makes them so bloated and uncomfortable. To me, that's not a sign that you should be not eating cruciferous vegetables. It's a sign to me that we need to fix what's going on in your digestion so that you can tolerate those good foods. That said, you know what, you could have a particular thing going on in your biochemistry that prevents you from eating those kinds of foods, then that's something, of course, to work around. But there might be something that we might be able to do about that, you know, to help someone eat a more healthy diet. Great question.
Thank you. Another participant wants to know how you think the world is adapting to this area of medicine. It's not a new area, but isn't it widespread in some societies and not in others?
I think that's a completely valid point. You know, one of the reasons I think that I personally get a lot of traction amongst the community is because I bridge both an MD and natural healing. There are so many amazing natural healers out there that have been educated in healing systems that are so ancient and beautiful. One of my favorite herbal teachers in fellowship was this woman, Dr. Lodog, who I highly recommend you follow her, Dr. Tiriona Lodog. And she is Native American, and she talks so much about how her grandmother and her grandmother's grandmother, you know, makes poultices and herbal concoctions in her kitchen that she just grew up inherently knowing that, like, if she drank this, she would feel better. And we have all this data out there. It's just that we're not practicing it. And so I think, you know, as we get smarter and Western medicine gets better, more doctors are really looking for these alternatives because they recognize that inherently it comes back down to the way that we live our lifestyles. And so I think that we're going to be catching up. That's what the next 50 years are going to be, is catching up to what we understood several hundred years ago. We're going to come back full circle. Great question.
Thank you. Another person had said, I know a person who couldn't hold a mobile phone next to his ear. It would cause his tonsils to swell and pain in his ears. What do you know about the connection?
You know, I don't know much about that specific connection, but you know, whenever our tonsils get inflamed, or you know, our immune system is telling us that like something is awry, we best listen to it. And it's possible that pain in the ear could be something going on with like the swelling in the back of the throat from the tonsils being enlarged and inflamed, because there's a tube that connects the middle ear down into the back of the throat called the eustachian tube. That's the one that we pop, you know, when we're climbing in an airplane, or you know, just feel like that, you know, needs to get cleared in the back of our ears. Our ears want to pop. So there could be a slight connection between the ears hurting, the tonsillar tissue kind of swelling, and like the immune system just sort of saying like, I don't want this thing, you know. And it's important to recognize also that like a lot of us just ignore these kinds of signals. We're just like, you know, when I drink too much beer and I eat too much pizza, like I feel really gross the next day, but whatever, I don't care. This is your body's way of saying like, hey babe, this isn't what you should be doing for yourself. And we best really listen to that. And when you start to listen to your body, when you really listen to what your body has to teach you, that's when everything opens up and you start to realize that that's your rhythm within this like lifespan. And so I'm just really intrigued by that idea of like us listening to our bodies more. And your friend sounds like he's listening to his body.
Thank you. One person asked, is integrative medicine covered by insurance?
Oh, my
Integrative
friends,
Docs.
it is
Ah,
down at the Center for Integrative Medicine and Wellness in Stamford. We're a part of Stamford Health, right at the Tully Center in Stamford. We are covered by insurance. We take Medicare, Medicaid, and all of the commercial insurers. And so I would happily take you here at my practice. There are certainly many other integrative medicine practitioners who don't take insurance, but I encourage you to seek out all of your resources for sure. And I work with, I'm not the only one here. I have 4 partners in crime who also do amazing work. And the 5 of us, we do a lot of really great things on a daily basis.
thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you, Dr. Katie, for coming today and sharing these very valuable insights for all of us. You certainly made us realize that health is a marathon and not a sprint. So I want to thank you for concluding our longevity economy series by talking about longevity health. Thank you all for coming, and may you all have a great day. Thank you.